Have you ever stopped to think that the very air around your phone, your laptop, all those devices filled with invisible wireless signals might actually be a highway for silent, unauthenticated attacks?
It's a pretty chilling thought, isn't it?
Yeah, imagine a hacker, maybe sitting nearby, could potentially take full control of your device without you ever knowing, just by exploiting some tiny vulnerability in how your devices connect.
hmm
Today, we're diving deep into exactly that reality.
It's a crucial topic.
It really is. And before we start unraveling all these digital mysteries, could you do us a quick favor? Hit that like button, subscribe to the deep dive, and maybe share this with anyone you know who's looking to boost their cybersecurity IQ.
Yeah, definitely share it. These are insights you don't want to miss, could genuinely help protect your career, your digital life.
Absolutely. And as always, check the description below. We've put together some extra resources there, curated just for you.
Good stuff in there.
So welcome to a special deep dive. This one's tailored especially for students in BCIS 4345, Network and Systems Security, but also for any early career professional in MIS, CIS, or IT.
Right. Our mission today is really to equip you with critical knowledge and practical skills.
Yeah.
Think of it as a shortcut to being truly well-informed about these often overlooked vulnerabilities in our wireless world.
We're drawing insights from the CompTIA Security Plus guide and also some cutting-edge research to explore these computer-related risks, best practices for securing modern electronic data systems, and, yeah, future trends, too.
Get ready to understand network and system security, not as like a static defense, a wall you build once,
Right.
but it's a continuous process. It involves constant analysis, implementation, evaluation, and crucially, maintenance.
Always got to keep maintaining. Okay, let's get into it. Section 1, the invisible threat, understanding wireless vulnerabilities. Okay, let's unpack this first bit. Wireless technology. I mean, it fundamentally reshaped our world, right?
Oh, absolutely. Revolutionized it.
Yeah. Who doesn't love the freedom? Working from anywhere, streaming from any room, connecting all your smart gadgets without that, tangled mess of wires everywhere.
It's incredibly convenient, no doubt about it.
But this very convenience, this seamless connectivity, it also introduces a pretty profound and often invisible security challenge.
That's the crux of it.
Yeah.
What's truly fascinating here is that while wireless local area networks, or WLANs, bring these unparalleled benefits, their core architecture, the fact they rely on radio or infrared signals instead of physical wires, that introduces an inherent vulnerability.
Okay, inherent how?
Well, unlike a wired network, which is physically contained, by walls, by cables, a wireless network just doesn't have physical boundaries.
Ah, right.
Think of it this way. A wired connection is like whispering a secret directly into someone's ear. Very private. A wireless connection, though, it's more like shouting your private conversations in a crowded park.
Okay, yeah, that's a good analogy.
Anyone within signal range, if they have the right tools, can potentially intercept those messages. Your Wi-Fi signals, they don't politely stop at your router or the walls of your house. They radiate outwards into the public airwaves.
So it's not contained within my property at all. It's just out there, floating around for anyone curious enough to pick it up. That's a little unsettling when you really think about it.
It absolutely is. And this makes wireless communications inherently easier to compromise, potentially exposing private and sensitive data. This lack of a physical boundary, that's the critical risk you need to grasp for your network defense strategies.
Right.
Whether you're trying to secure your home network from, say, a tech-savvy neighbor, or you're managing a vast corporate infrastructure where just one exposed access point could compromise the entire organization.
Wow.
The invisible nature of wireless transmission makes the threat, ironically, far more pervasive and difficult to contain. It really requires a different mindset for security compared to wired networks.
A whole different way of thinking. Okay, so when we talk about wireless attacks, I know they generally fall into two main categories: active and passive. What's the fundamental difference there? Why does understanding that distinction matter so much as we build our cybersecurity knowledge?
That's an excellent question because the type of attack really dictates the defense you need to employ. The core goal of any attacker, remember, is always to undermine confidentiality, integrity, or availability. That's the classic CIA triad of security.
Right, the CIA triad.
We categorize attacks as either active or passive based on how they interact with the network. Passive attacks are all about observing. They seek to gain sensitive data without altering anything.
Like a spy just listening in.
Exactly. They're like a silent eavesdropper. And this makes them incredibly difficult to detect because, by definition, they leave no trace on your system logs, no obvious signs of tampering. Prevention, through robust encryption, is often the only effective countermeasure against passive attacks. Active attacks, on the other hand, they actively modify data, or they disrupt services, or inject malicious content. They cause direct harm to the network or its users.
Okay, so they're noisier, maybe?
Typically more noticeable, yes, but often more immediately destructive as well. Let's start with those active attacks. These are the direct ones, disruptive, often immediately impactful.
Okay.
Denial of service, DS, and distributed denial of service, DDoS, are classic examples. Their aim is simple: prevent authorized users from accessing services. Basically shut down a part of, or maybe even an entire network.
How does that work wirelessly?
In the wireless realm, this can manifest as simple RF or wireless jamming, where an attacker just floods the airwaves with noise, interference, making legitimate signals impossible to transmit or receive clearly.
Just drown everything out.
Pretty much. Or it can be through more targeted digital means, like beacon floods. This overwhelms an access point with an avalanche of fake beacon frames, those little "hello, I'm here" signals, making it unable to process legitimate requests.
Too much noise for the AP to handle.
Right. We also see authentication to authentication floods. These rapidly send fake kickoff or join requests to clients, forcing them off the network or preventing them from connecting in the first place.
Yeah.
Very disruptive.
I remember hearing about that huge DDoS attack on GitHub back in 2018. That must have been a massive disruption.
It was indeed. A prime example. In that 2018 attack, GitHub servers were bombarded with, get this, 129.6 million data packets per second.
Wow, per second.
Per second. Even with their advanced mitigation strategies already in place, it caused a significant 20 minutes of downtime. Now, for a global platform like GitHub, that's a massive disruption, affecting countless developers and projects worldwide.
Yeah, 20 minutes is an eternity for a service like that.
It clearly shows how, even with robust defenses, these active attacks can inflict real damage and impact productivity on a huge scale. Then there's masquerading. This is where an attacker poses as a legitimate user or device to gain unauthorized access. It's incredibly insidious because the system genuinely believes it's interacting with a trusted entity.
How do they pull that off?
It can stem from stolen credentials, maybe a poorly configured wireless network that doesn't check things properly, or even an insider threat creating a backdoor. The common technique here is MSC address spoofing.
Spoofing the MSC is?
Yeah, largely because many older 802.11 networks often fail to properly authenticate the source MSE address. So an attacker can simply pretend to be a valid device already on the network by mimicking its address.
Just copy the ID card, basically.
Essentially. Then we have replay attack, another active threat. Here, an attacker captures an authentic session, maybe when you log into your corporate Wi-Fi,
Okay.
and then retransmits or replays that captured session later to gain network access without altering the original communication.
Like recording a keycard swipe and playing it back.
Exactly like that. It gives the attacker access without having the real keycard, or in this case, the real credentials or session. And finally, there's message modification. This is where an attacker actively deletes, adds, or maybe just rearranges parts of a legitimate communication stream. Imagine a critical command being sent and an attacker subtly altering it mid-transmission to achieve their own malicious goal. This directly compromises data integrity.
Altering the message itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's scary. Okay, those active attacks sound pretty bad because they're so disruptive and overt, but I'm almost more worried about the passive ones. If they're silent, leave no trace, how do you even know they're happening, and what forms do they usually take?
You're right to be concerned. Passive attacks are inherently stealthy. They are designed to be undetectable. Their primary goal is silent surveillance and intelligence gathering.
Just watching.
Just watching. The most straightforward is eavesdropping. This just involves monitoring and intercepting wireless signals, the raw packets, the messages, as they travel between an access point and a client.
Listening in on the airwaves.
Correct. Attackers can discover critical metadata like the source address, the destination, the size of the packets, the transmission time. What's particularly alarming here is that common devices, like specialized antennas, can scan these 802.11 signals from surprisingly great distances.
Really? How far are we talking?
It can be significant, depending on the equipment and environment. Miles, potentially, with the right gear. This makes it nearly impossible to stop just with physical security measures like locking doors. If the signal leaves your building, it's potentially fair game for interception out there.
Wow. Okay.
Building on eavesdropping, we have traffic analysis, sometimes called packet analysis. This is about gathering intelligence by examining communication patterns, even if the messages themselves are encrypted.
So even if they can't read the message, they can learn things.
Absolutely. By looking at the rhythm, the volume, the destinations of traffic, An attacker can infer a lot about network activity. They might identify sensitive data flows, figure out who's talking to whom, when peak activity times are, things like that.
Hmm. Like watching cars on a highway, even if you can't see inside them.
That's a good way to put it. This often starts with footprinting. That's the initial reconnaissance step, gathering as much information as possible about a target network.
What kind of info?
Things like IP addresses, DNS information, maybe even user IDs if they leak out. It helps determine communication load, typical packet sizes, general data flow. It basically provides a roadmap for planning later, perhaps more active, attacks. A passive sniffer tool like Kismet, for example, can gather extensive network information names of networks, their locations, the channels used by access points, even if things like SSID broadcasting are turned off.
Even if the network name isn't broadcast. Wow.
Yep. Then spying takes this a step further. A hacker, often with their network adapter, set to what's called promiscuous mode.
Promiscuous mode.
Yeah, it means the adapter captures all traffic it sees, not just traffic addressed specifically to it.
Okay.
So the hacker passively monitors all encrypted data traffic on a network, essentially just hoovering up everything being transmitted. They then take this captured data offline and analyze it, looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything useful.
And then there's war driving, right? That's the classic image, someone driving around with a laptop looking for weak Wi-Fi signals.
Exactly. War driving is precisely what it sounds like. Actively driving around, usually with a portable antenna connected to a laptop or phone, scanning for vulnerable Wi-Fi networks. It's often a precursor to a larger attack, identifying weak points like networks still using old security or none at all. That can be exploited later. For older, less secure networks using protocols like, say, WEP, tools like WepiCrack were specifically designed to exploit these weaknesses discovered during war driving.
Right, cracking those old keys.
And finally, a slightly less glamorous but sometimes equally effective method is dumpster diving.
Literally going through the trash.
Sometimes, yes. It's similar to war driving in its goal of information gathering, but it involves finding passwords, maybe network diagrams or other sensitive information in physical waste, trash cans, recycle bins, or perhaps on abandoned, unsecured equipment that hasn't been properly wiped. It's a low-tech approach, but it can yield surprisingly high-value results.
Never underestimate the low-tech stuff.
Absolutely not. Understanding these distinct types of risks, active versus passive, is crucial for your case analysis and network security. It directly informs how you develop robust approaches to secure modern electronic data systems. It ensures you're not just reacting to the visible active threats, but also anticipating and preventing the silent passive ones. These are foundational skills you'll need to implement, evaluate, and maintain secure systems throughout your career.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You need to defend against both the loud attackers and the quiet spies. Okay, so this naturally leads us into how our defenses have evolved. It really is a constant cat and mouse game, isn't it? As new threats emerge, our digital defenses have to evolve too. It feels like a never-ending arms race, with attackers constantly finding new angles, new weaknesses.
That's a perfect description. It's a continuous cycle of vulnerability discovery, exploitation, and then patching or protocol improvement.
So let's trace that evolution. Let's look at the common Wi-Fi security protocols, starting with where it all began, maybe for better or for worse.
Right. Our journey into wireless security really begins with Wired Equivalent Privacy, or WEP.
WEP, I remember that one.
Yeah, it was introduced way back in 1999, alongside the original 802.1nb standard. Its intention, as the name suggests, was actually quite noble. It aimed to provide a level of security for wireless networks that was comparable, or equivalent, to wired networks.
Okay.
Specifically, the goal was to prevent eavesdropping and stop unauthorized users from connecting to the network. At its inception, WEP used a shared 40-bit RC4 encryption key.
Shared, meaning everyone used the same key.
Exactly. The same key was used by the access point and all connected wireless clients.
That sounds like a reasonable idea on paper, trying to replicate wired security. But if we're talking about it as a misstep, I'm guessing it had some pretty significant flaws that became apparent pretty quickly.
You're absolutely spot on. WEP quickly revealed several intrinsic fundamental security flaws that made it, frankly, insecure. As the source material we looked at explicitly states, WE technology should not be utilized as the only means of protecting wireless networks. And honestly, it should be avoided at all costs today.
So it gives a false sense of security?
Completely. It's worse than having no security in some ways, because people think they're protected when they're not.
Okay, so let's get into those flaws. What made WEP so bad?
Let's delve into those vulnerabilities. First, and this is critical, the integrity check value, ICV. This was basically a checksum using CRC32, meant to detect if a frame's contents were altered in transit.
Okay, like a data quality check.
Right. But the problem was the ICV itself was not encrypted. It was just tacked onto the end of the frame.
Ah.
This meant an attacker could modify the data payload, and then, knowing how the checksum was calculated, which was public knowledge, they could simply recalculate and update the ICV to match the modified data. The receiving end wouldn't know the difference.
So it completely undermined data integrity.
Totally. Integrity, one of the core pillars of security, was gone. Second, and perhaps the most obviously problematic issue, was the use of those shared static keys. All WLAN users shared the exact same, unchanging encryption key.
That sounds like a logistical nightmare, too.
It was, if just one device was compromised, or even if an attacker managed to deduce the key through cryptanalysis, which, given WIF's weaknesses, turned out to be quite easy to do. The entire network was instantly at risk. And changing these keys, it was a monumental effort. You had to manually update the key on every single device connected to the network. Impractical for large organizations and even annoying for home users.
So if someone walked off with a company laptop or even just sat outside and cracked that single network key, the entire corporate Wi-Fi could be compromised instantly. That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
Precisely. It was a massive single point of failure. And adding to this, WP was often optional and disabled by default on routers and devices.
Oh, really? Why?
Convenience, mostly. Many users may be unaware of its importance or just prioritizing getting connected easily over security, never even enabled WEP. They left the networks completely wide open and unprotected.
Just open to the world.
Yep. A fourth major vulnerability stemmed from its small initialization vector. The 4V is a small, limited-length value, only 24 bits, used alongside the static key to encrypt the data. Because it was so small, it had to be repeated frequently, especially on busy networks.
And repeated patterns are bad in crypto, right?
Very bad. Passive attacks could easily sniff and capture these IVs from the air. Over time, by collecting enough packets with these repeating IVs, attackers could perform cryptanalysis to decrypt encrypted data without ever knowing the actual WEP key. This weakness is what made WP particularly susceptible to those war-driving attacks, using tools like WP Crack. They could just passively collect data and crack the key relatively quickly.
So you didn't even need to interact with the network, just listen.
Exactly. And finally, WEP offered no defense against replay attacks. An attacker could easily record legitimate WEP packets and then retransmit them later. They could use this to create forgeries, maybe inject malicious traffic, or just gather more information about the encryption key, further undermining the network's security. The inherent weakness of the RC4 stream cipher algorithm also made authenticated messages easily falsifiable.
Wow. Okay, so WEP was basically a collection of security holes held together by good intentions.
That's a fair summary. Well-intentioned, but fundamentally flawed. It provided a dangerous false sense of security. It should absolutely not be used in any modern network. Avoid it like the plague.
So WP clearly wasn't cutting it. It sounds like a digital sieve, really, just letting everything through. What came next? What did the industry do to shore up our defenses and give us something, actually robust?
Well, in direct response to all the glaring complaints and those inherent flaws of WAP, Wi-Fi Protected Access, or WPA, emerged around 2003.
WPA, okay.
It was initially conceived as kind of a temporary security measure, a patch, really. It was meant to bridge the gap until a more comprehensive standard, which became WPA2, could be finalized and ratified. But WPA made some significant improvements right away.
Like what? What were the key changes?
The biggest one was introducing dynamic encryption keys through the Temporal Key Integrity Protocol, or TKIP.
TKIP, we heard that acronym earlier.
Right. Unlike WEP static, easily compromised keys that everyone shared, TKA constantly changes the encryption key used for each packet, or at least very frequently. It generated unique keys for each client. This made it exponentially harder for hackers to break the encryption compared to WEP.
So no more shared static key. That sounds like a huge improvement.
It was massive. WPA also added an integrity check mechanism called Michael for network packets. This helped ensure that data hadn't been tampered with in transit, addressing that unencrypted ICV problem in WEP. So better confidentiality and better integrity.
Okay, so WPA was a good step up. Then WPA2 came along.
Yes, WPA was quickly followed by WPA2, which was a truly significant leap forward in wireless security. WPA2 fully adopted the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES, block cipher.
AES, right. That's still considered very strong today.
It is. AES is a much stronger, more modern encryption algorithm, widely recognized for its robustness. WPA2 paired AES with the counter-mode cipher blockchaining message authentication code protocol, or CCMP.
CCMP.
CCMP provided both encryption using AES and strong integrity protection. This combination offered a much higher level of security, finally replacing the vulnerable RC4 stream cipher used by WEP and also by TEAC IRP in the original WPA. WPA2 with AES CCMP became the new standard.
That sounds much, much better. Like, we finally got a handle on things with stronger, standardized encryption. But even WPA2, which, let's be honest, is still quite common in many places.
It isn't perfect either. I mean, that cat and mouse game you mentioned implies there are always new angles of attack, even on supposedly strong systems.
You're perceptive. You're absolutely right. Despite the vast improvements, WPA and especially WPA2 are not entirely bulletproof. They certainly raise the bar significantly compared to WEP, but some lingering vulnerabilities do exist.
That's it.
For instance, they are still susceptible to brute force and dictionary attacks, particularly if users choose weak passphrases or passwords. If someone can guess your Wi-Fi password, even WPA2 encryption won't stop them from joining the network.
The human element is always a factor. Always. And even WPA2 AES, while generally considered robust, can be vulnerable to certain types of attacks, like internal offline dictionary attacks if an attacker captures the initial handshake, and some specific denial of service attacks. And here's a critical point for your understanding, something often overlooked. The WPA encryption standard, even WPA2 with AES, only applies to data frames.
Only the data itself. What about other traffic?
Right. It leaves management frames, those essential messages used for network operations like authentication, deauthentication, association, probing, completely unencrypted.
Oh, wow. So the control signals are sent in the clear.
Essentially, yes. This omission opens the door to various attacks. Attackers can exploit these unprotected management frames to, for example, send spoof deauthentication packets to kick legitimate users off the network, a type of DOS, or conduct other disruptive or manipulative actions even if the actual data being sent later is strongly encrypted.
So they can mess with the connection itself, even if they can't read the data.
Precisely. It's a significant gap. Another practical challenge with WPA2, especially when it was first introduced, was its increased processing power requirements compared to WAG or WPATKIP.
It needed more horsepower.
Yeah. Implementing AES encryption in hardware required more capable chips. This often necessitated costly hardware upgrades or even complete replacements for older routers and client devices. This acted as a significant barrier for many organizations and individuals, delaying widespread adoption despite its clear security benefits. People stuck with the less secure options because upgrading was expensive or difficult.
Right, the cost factor.
And this highlights a continuous theme in cybersecurity, something really relevant to your future careers. Security is often a trade-off. You're balancing robust protection against factors like cost, convenience, usability, performance. Understanding these compromises and being able to articulate them clearly to stakeholders, whether it's management, clients, or end users, is a key consideration when you're tasked with implementing security measures. You'll constantly be navigating that balance between the ideal security posture and the practical limitations of the real world.
That's a really important point. It's not just about the tech, it's about the context.
Yeah.
Okay, so WPA2 was a big step, but had issues. That leads us to the latest iteration. The evolution continues with WPA3. This was designed specifically to address the known issues of its predecessors, WPA and WPA2, and finally tackle some of those lingering vulnerabilities like the unencrypted management frames. It feels like a constant game of catch-up, but hopefully WPA3 is getting closer to a truly solid solution. What new features does it bring to the table? And are there still any chinks in its armor that hackers are already trying to exploit?
You're absolutely right. The catch-up never truly ends in security, but WPA3 is definitely a major leap forward. It was developed by the Wi-Fi Alliance and announced in 2018. It truly represents the third-generation Wi-Fi security protocols. And its goal was explicit: significantly improve security and specifically address those persistent problems found in WPA and especially WPA2.
Okay, so what are the highlights?
WPA3 introduces several key features and innovations. For WPA3 Personal, the version most home users would encounter, it employs simultaneous authentication of equivalence, or SAE.
SAE. Okay, what does that do?
SAE is a much more modern password-based authentication technology. It offers a quantifiable defense against those offline dictionary and brute force attacks that could plague WPA2 if the handshake was captured. What makes SAE particularly powerful is that it creates unique, individualized encryption keys for every authentication session. It uses a technique sometimes called a dragonfly handshake.
Unique keys every time. How does that help?
It means even if an attacker captures the handshake traffic, they can't easily take it offline and hammer away at it with password guesses like they could with WPA2's PSK. It also prevents adversaries from launching large-scale attacks on captured packets, and maybe even more importantly, it stops network members from easily eavesdropping on each other's encrypted communications. That was a lingering concern in WPA2 networks, where, technically, everyone shared the same underlying key material. SAE provides forward secrecy and better individual protection.
So better protection against both outsiders and insiders. Nice. What about for bigger networks?
For more demanding environments, there's WPA3 Enterprise. This builds upon the robust foundation set by WPA2 Enterprise, which already used stronger authentication methods like 802.1x. WPA3 Enterprise mandates the use of protected management frames, or PMF.
Ah, PMF. So it finally encrypts those management frames.
Exactly. This protects against dangerous intrusions like eavesdropping on network management traffic and prevents spoofed deauthentication or disassociation attacks, addressing that major WPA2 loophole. WPA3 Enterprise also offers an optional 192-bit security mode, providing an even higher level of cryptographic strength, which might be crucial for government, financial institutions, or other organizations handling highly sensitive data.
And what about public Wi-Fi? That's always felt like the Wild West.
WPA3 has a great answer for that too. Wi-Fi Enhanced Open. This is a fantastic innovation specifically for public Wi-Fi networks, like in coffee shops, airports, hotels. It allows for unauthenticated data encryption through something called Opportunistic Wireless Encryption, or OWE.
Unauthenticated encryption. How does that work without a password?
Essentially, even though you don't enter a password to join the network, OWE allows your device and the access point to negotiate a unique encryption key for your session behind the scenes. It simplifies security, no password needed, but ensures that your data is encrypted between your device and the AP. It mandates GCMP 256 encryption, a strong standard. This makes it very difficult for someone else connected to the same public hotspot to sniff your traffic, which was trivially easy on traditional open networks.
That's huge, making open networks actually somewhat private. Okay, so WPA3 sounds like a massive step in the right direction, patching up many of those older vulnerabilities, making public Wi-Fi much safer. But is it truly the silver bullet we've been looking for, or are there still challenges, new vulnerabilities emerging?
It's certainly a significant improvement, a huge step forward, but as we've established, perfection in cybersecurity is an elusive, probably unattainable goal. Even WPA3, despite its advancements, isn't entirely perfect and does face some emerging vulnerabilities and challenges.
Like what?
Well, there have been some concerns raised about potential cheap hacks that could, under certain circumstances, reveal network passwords. These are believed to be caused by subtle protocol implementation errors, bugs in the code, rather than flaws in the standard itself.
Implementation bugs, okay.
Additionally, a major practical challenge is still low device adoption. Many existing devices, especially older or cheaper ones, lack the hardware capabilities to support WPA3 and would require costly upgrades or replacement. This creates a slower transition period, leaving a large installed base still using WPA2 and vulnerable to its known attacks.
The upgrade cycle problem.
Exactly. Furthermore, WPA3, while much stronger, remains potentially susceptible to certain disconnection attacks. And critically, researchers discovered vulnerabilities collectively known as Dragon Blood.
Dragon blood sounds dramatic.
It does. These are side-channel leaks discovered in the Dragonfly handshake protocol used by SAE. Under certain conditions, these leaks could potentially allow attackers to mount offline brute force attacks against the network password, somewhat undermining one of WPA3's core promises of stronger password-based authentication, though it's still considered much harder than with WPA2.
So even the new handshake isn't perfect.
It seems not entirely, or at least its implementations might have issues. If we look at the broader landscape, these developments are critical for understanding future trends in network security. They highlight the ongoing need for vigilance, for adaptation, in selecting best practices for securing data integrity and implementing robust encryption. Your role as a cybersecurity professional won't just be to implement the latest standard, like WPA3. It will be to understand its nuances, its remaining weaknesses, how to configure it properly, and how to combine it with other security measures like network segmentation, intrusion detection, user education, to create a truly resilient, layered security system. It really reinforces that idea of security as a continuous process: analysis, implementation, evaluation, and maintenance, always evaluating, always maintaining.
Always learning, always adapting. Okay, that covers Wi-Fi pretty thoroughly. Let's shift gears a bit. So we've talked extensively about Wi-Fi security, and for good reason, it's everywhere. But what about other ubiquitous wireless technologies? Things we rely on every single day, like Bluetooth and NFC. They often seem to fly under the radar in security discussions, almost taken for granted, maybe because they just work so seamlessly most of the time. Are they as secure as we might assume?
That's an excellent point. They definitely deserve just as much scrutiny, perhaps even more in some cases, because they operate so close to us physically. Let's start with Bluetooth. It is, without a doubt, the leading short-range communication protocol globally. Over 8.2 billion devices currently in use, and that number is just skyrocketing with the Internet of Things.
Billions.
Yeah, from our smartphones and wearables to smart TVs, printers, medical appliances, cars. It's absolutely everywhere.
Wow.
Yet its sheer complexity presents a major security challenge. To illustrate this, the official Bluetooth specification is a staggering 822 pages long.
Wait, seriously, 2,800 pages?
Seriously, compare that to Wi-Fi's main 802.11 specification, which is only about 450 pages. Quite a massive difference. So every time I effortlessly connect my headphones or my mouse, there's basically a 2,800-page novel of potential complexity and potential headaches waiting underneath. My respect for those little Bluetooth chips just went up, and maybe my paranoia too. Light chuckle. Exactly. That level of over-engineering, while enabling a vast range of features, creates numerous potential pitfall junctions in its various implementations across different operating systems and devices. More complexity often means more opportunities for bugs.
Right, more places for things to go wrong.
And consequently, more vulnerabilities for attackers to potentially exploit. This intricate design makes thorough security auditing incredibly difficult, even for the vendors themselves.
Can you give an example of this complexity causing problems?
Sure. A prime example of maybe unnecessary complexity is fragmentation. That's breaking large data into smaller chunks for transmission, a common soft spot in many protocols. Bluetooth has no less than 4 different fragmentation layers operating at different levels of its stack.
4 different ways to chop up data. Why?
Good question. From the link controller level, up to the L2CAP layer, and even within specific services like SDP. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this multi-layered fragmentation just increases the potential for errors in reassembly, buffer handling, things like that, which, as we'll see later, can lead to serious vulnerabilities. Now, let's address a core misconception that many users hold about Bluetooth security. Demystifying discoverability.
Okay, this sounds important.
Myth number 1. Many users believe that if their Bluetooth device isn't actively set to discoverable mode, that setting you use when you first pair something, where it's actively broadcasting its presence, they believe it's safe from attack.
Yeah, I think most people assume that. If I'm not discoverable, how can anyone find me to attack me?
The stark reality. This is a critical misconception. A Bluetooth-enabled device is almost always listening for incoming connection requests, even when it's not discoverable. This state is often called page scan mode. It's waiting for devices it already knows, or sometimes any device, to try and connect directly.
Always listening, even if I turn discoverability off.
Almost always yes, if the Bluetooth radio is on. To establish a connection, an attacker often only needs one key piece of information: the device's BDA-DDR. That's its unique Bluetooth device address. Essentially, it's MAC address for Bluetooth.
So simply turning off discoverable mode isn't enough to hide my device from a determined attacker. That's quite a revelation for most people, I bet.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And what's more, obtaining that BDA-DR, which was once thought to be difficult for non-discoverable devices, turns out to be actually quite easy in many scenarios.
Phew.
Even though Bluetooth connections are typically encrypted, the low-level packet headers, which are often transmitted in plaintext before encryption is established, contain enough information, like something called the access code in Bluetooth Classic packets, from which the BDA-DR can often be derived or inferred. So if your device generates any Bluetooth traffic, even a single packet trying to find a known device perhaps, an attacker in physical proximity could potentially grab its BDA-DDR.
Just by listening passively.
Right. And what if your device generates absolutely no Bluetooth traffic and is only passively listening? It's still often possible to guess or infer the BDA-DDR by sniffing its Wi-Fi traffic.
Wait, Wi-Fi traffic, how does that help get the Bluetooth address?
It's viable because Wi-Fi MAC addresses appear unencrypted over the air in things like probe requests. And many manufacturers, for cost or design reasons, use similar or sequential AMC addresses for the internal Bluetooth and Wi-Fi adapters within the same device. So if an attacker sniffs your phone's Wi-Fi MAC address, they might be able to make a very educated guess about its Bluetooth BDADDR.
Wow, that's sneaky. They're linked.
Often, yes. Not always, but often enough to be a viable technique. So to connect this back to you, the listener, simply turning off discoverable mode isn't nearly enough protection. Your device's constant listening state, if Bluetooth is on, provides a surprisingly wide attack surface to anyone within physical proximity within RF range. This fundamental understanding is crucial for assessing real-world risk, especially when you start thinking about the physical security aspects of network defense. Proximity is key here.
Proximity is the threat. Okay, that's Bluetooth. What about the other close-range tech, NFC?
Right. Next up is near-field communication, or NFC. Another short-range wireless technology, typically operating over just a few centimeters. It has truly revolutionized things like contactless payments and seamless data sharing.
Yeah, tap to pay is everywhere now. Super convenient.
Incredibly convenient. Think about tapping your phone or card to pay at the store, or quickly pairing new devices just by bringing them close together. But like any convenience, it comes with its own set of security risks that are rapidly evolving, often without us even realizing the potential dangers.
Okay, so what are the main risks with NFC?
Let's outline some common NFC security risks. The most significant is probably eavesdropping. Because the range is so short, you might think it's safe. But a malicious actor can potentially intercept data exchanged between two NFC-enabled devices by placing a rogue NFC reader very nearby,
How close would they need to be?
typically within a few centimeters of the transaction. But with specialized, perhaps hidden antennas, that range could potentially be extended slightly. This reader could invisibly capture sensitive information, like credit card details during a tap-to-pay transaction, without the user ever knowing they've been compromised. The attacker just needs to be physically close at the right moment.
So someone standing too close in line could potentially skim my card info.
It's technically possible, though modern contactless cards have security features to mitigate this. A more likely scenario might involve compromised payment terminals or skimmers placed over legitimate readers. Another concern is unauthorized access. Vulnerabilities in the NFC protocol itself, or perhaps more commonly, in the applications that use NFC, could potentially be exploited to gain access to sensitive data stored on a device. This might include authentication credentials, personal information, if the device isn't properly secured with additional layers like screen lock or biometric authentication before allowing NFC actions.
So it's not just about the tap itself, it's about the data behind it. And you said cybercriminals are constantly finding and adapting to these. How have NFC attacks evolved over time, from the early days to what we might see today?
Cybercriminals are incredibly adaptable, yes. The evolution of NFC attacks really demonstrates their persistence and ingenuity. We saw early instances like the Android.NFC FONCI malware discovered way back in 2011. This malware exploited NFC capabilities in a simple but effective way. It redirected users to malicious websites just by having them scan an infected NFC tag.
Like a malicious QR code, but automatic just by tapping.
Exactly. Imagine tapping a poster or a coaster with an embedded NFC tag, expecting maybe a coupon or some information, and instead your phone's browser silently opens a phishing site or starts downloading malware. No warning. Fast forward to modern tactics, and the attacks are far more sophisticated and discreet. For example, criminals have developed contactless ATM skimmers. These devices are designed to be placed over or near the card slot on an ATM and wirelessly invisibly steal card details from contactless cards via NFC as people use the machine. They're often designed to blend seamlessly with the legitimate ATM hardware, making them incredibly challenging to detect.
Wow, skimming wirelessly.
Yeah. Hackers also target NFC-enabled mobile payment apps using various tactics. This might include setting up fake Wi-Fi networks in public places, and then using social engineering to trick users into tapping their phone against a malicious reader, perhaps disguised as a payment terminal or information point, potentially compromising their payment credentials or other data stored in the app. They leverage that initial NFC tap as an entry vector.
So what's the real impact here? What happens when these attacks succeed?
The impact of NFC attacks is broad and can be quite severe. For individuals, personal data is profoundly at risk. Credit card details, maybe linked bank accounts, potentially even things like social security numbers or personal addresses, depending on what app is compromised, can be stolen. This leads directly to identity theft, financial fraud, and the sale of your valuable information on the dark web. Beyond the financial loss, the psychological impact can be devastating. It erodes trust in these convenient digital systems and leaves victims feeling vulnerable, exposed, maybe even violated.
Definitely erodes trust. And what about businesses? They must take a hit too.
Oh, absolutely. For businesses, the financial implications are substantial. Security breaches involving NFC, especially payment systems, lead to direct financial losses through fraudulent transactions, chargebacks, but also severe damage to their reputation. Customers lose trust, revenue decreases. Then there are the costly investigations, potential regulatory fines like under GDPR or PCI DSS, and possible legal actions. Restoring customer trust after an attack demands significant resources, strategic communication, and often impacts governance and compliance policies moving forward.
It's a ripple effect. So how do we defend against this? What are the protection strategies?
We need advanced protection strategies, combining user awareness and technical solutions. Users should adopt best practices. This includes things like regularly updating their devices' operating systems and all their applications. Patches often fix known vulnerabilities. Enabling automatic updates is generally a good idea to minimize that window of opportunity for attackers.
Keep things updated, got it.
Practicing safe NFC habits is equally crucial. Only initiate NFC connections with trusted devices or sources. Be cautious with unfamiliar NFC tags you might find in public. Avoid sharing highly sensitive information over unsecured NFC connections, especially if you're also connected to, say, public Wi-Fi at the same time.
Yeah.
And consider simple physical security. Using NFC blocking sleeves or wallets can physically prevent unauthorized scanning of your contactless cards when they're in your pocket or bag.
Those blocking wallets actually work.
They generally do, by creating a Faraday cage effect around the card. From a technical standpoint, implementing secure element technology is key. This involves dedicated tamper-resistant hardware components embedded in NFC-enabled devices, like your phone or payment card, specifically designed to securely store and process sensitive information, like cryptographic keys or payment credentials. It isolates this critical data from the main operating system, making it much harder for malware to access.
Okay, specialized hardware.
Additionally, using robust encryption protocols like Transport Layer Security, TLS, for any data transmitted after the NFC tap, and employing dynamic encryption keys or tokenization for each transaction significantly enhances security. Tokenization replaces your actual card number with a one-time use token, so even if intercepted, it's useless.
Right, tokenization is big in payments now.
And finally, biometric authentication like fingerprint or facial recognition and multi-factor authentication, MFA, add crucial layers of protection. Requiring authentication before an NFC payment can be made ensures only the authorized user can complete the transaction, even if the phone is lost or stolen.
Layers of security.
Exactly. This whole section really highlights critical risks to data integrity and the paramount importance of implementing, evaluating, and maintaining comprehensive security measures. This includes both physical security, like NFC blocking, and advanced technical controls, like encryption and secure elements. Ensuring that you, as future professionals, are equipped to protect modern electronic data systems from these evolving threats is vital. These skills are central to managing network operations securely and responding effectively when incidents do occur.
Okay, that gives us a good picture of the risks beyond just Wi-Fi. Now, let's dive even deeper into Bluetooth.
All right, let's get into the real nitty-gritty now. We're talking about the fundamental building blocks of Bluetooth communication, the protocols deep inside the stack. This is where even subtle flaws, maybe just a few lines of incorrect code, can lead to catastrophic consequences. This is where that complexity we discussed earlier really starts to show its teeth, right? Hiding deep within the system's architecture. Precisely. We're peeling back the layers now. Let's start near the bottom with L2CAP. L2CAP, or Logical Link Control and Adaptation Protocol, is a foundational layer of the Bluetooth stack, sitting just above the baseband radio controller on the host side. Its primary responsibility is managing connections to various Bluetooth services, acting sort of like a traffic cop for different data streams going to different applications.
Okay, managing traffic.
Yeah, it handles logical channels, it can provide quality of service, QoS guarantees for things like audio streaming, it manages flow control so devices don't overwhelm each other, and, as we noted earlier, it implements yet another layer of fragmentation and reassembly for large data packets. It's a critical component doing a lot of heavy lifting. And flaws here can ripple upwards, affecting the entire system's security.
Okay, that sounds like a lot of intricate moving parts, a complex system just to manage data flow. So where did things go wrong here? Where was a vulnerability found that could actually be exploited in a major way? This is where it gets really interesting, I believe.
Absolutely. Here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, quite alarming. A critical vulnerability, designated CVE 2017-10251, was found in the Linux Bluetooth stack, which is called BlueZ. It specifically affected the way BlueZ's L2CAP implementation handled configuration responses during connection setup.
BlueZ. Okay, that's widely used, right? Android, Linux systems.
Very widely used.
Yeah.
Embedded systems, desktop servers, Android phones. BlueZ is everywhere.
So what was the flaw?
The core flaw was a classic, dangerous programming error, a stack-based buffer overflow. The system failed to adequately check the size of incoming data against the allocated memory space on the kernel stack.
The buffer overflow again, like
Yeah.
stuffing too much into a small box.
Exactly that analogy. Imagine you have a very small box on your workbench in this case, a 64-byte variable on the kernel's memory stack, a very sensitive area. The code was supposed to copy configuration options from a response packet into this small box. But the crucial error was that it didn't check how many options were in the response.
It just copied blindly.
It just copied blindly. An attacker could trigger this by sending a specially crafted sequence of Bluetooth configuration messages. First, they'd send a configuration request containing a specific element, an extended flow specification or EFS element, with a particular typeset. This forced the target device's L2CAP layer into a specific pending state during configuration.
Okay, put it in a waiting state.
Right. Then the attacker would send a malformed configuration response. In this response, they'd set the result field to indicate the configuration was still pending, and critically, they'd include more configuration options that could possibly fit into that small 64-byte buffer on the victim's kernel stack.
And because the size wasn't checked.
Because the size wasn't checked, the code would just keep copying those options, overflowing that 64-byte buffer, and writing the attacker's controlled data onto adjacent parts of the kernel stack.
So an attacker can just keep sending data past that small limit, essentially writing into critical kernel memory where they absolutely shouldn't be. And that gives them control.
Precisely. And what makes this particularly frightening is its impact and exploitability. This simple oversight, this failure to check a size, granted attackers complete and silent kernel-level control over any Bluetooth-enabled Linux device running an affected kernel version, which was many from v3.3 RC1 onwards.
Kernel-level control. That's game over, right? Full system compromise.
Total game over. No additional authentication or user interaction was required once the vulnerability was triggered. The attacker just needed to be within Bluetooth range. Furthermore, the Linux kernel, in many default configurations at the time, lacked crucial modern exploit mitigations. Things like stack canaries.
Stack canaries, like the bird.
Chuckles slightly. Sort of.
Yeah.
Think of them as secret values placed on the stack before a function's variables. If a buffer overflow occurs and overwrites the stack, it will likely change the canary's value. Before the function returns, it checks the canary. If it's changed, the system knows something bad happened and can crash safely instead of letting the attacker take control.
Okay, a tripwire.
A tripwire, exactly. And also, kernel address space layout randomization, KASLR. This is like constantly rearranging the furniture in a dark room. It makes it much harder for an attacker to reliably know where critical pieces of code or data are located in memory, which they need for exploitation. The common absence of these standard defenses on many Linux systems made exploiting this stack overflow frighteningly easy and reliable. It led directly to a remote code execution, RCE, at the highest privilege level.
Reliable RCE from a Bluetooth packet.
Oh, wow. And one more terrifying aspect.
Yeah.
The vulnerability was potentially wormable.
Wormable, meaning it could spread itself.
Yes. A compromised device could then be used to scan for other nearby vulnerable Bluetooth devices and attack them automatically, potentially creating a Bluetooth worm that spreads through densely populated areas.
That's the stuff of nightmares.
It really is. The broader lesson here is stark. Even seemingly subtle flaws in core system implementations, like a missing size check in a network protocol handler, can lead to the most severe computer-related risks imaginable. It underscores the absolute necessity for deep analysis of code, secure coding practices, and robust evaluation and testing processes. These are skills absolutely essential for anyone entering network and system security. It highlights the critical importance of continuous vulnerability assessment and patching.
Okay, moving up the Bluetooth stack from L2CAP, we find the Service Discovery Protocol, or SDP. You mentioned this earlier. It's where devices figure out what services each other offers, like a digital yellow pages for Bluetooth. It seems pretty innocuous, just information exchange. But surprisingly, even this foundational protocol held some critical information leaks.
Indeed it did. SDP allows devices to discover available services on other devices and, importantly, translates high-level service identifiers, called UUIDs, into the specific protocol service, multiplexers or PSMs, needed to establish an L2CAP connection to that service. So it's essential plumbing helping devices find the right port number for things like file transfer, audio streaming, or network access.
Okay, so it maps services to connection points.
Right. Now, SDP also has its own mechanism for handling large responses, like if a device offers many, many services. This mechanism is called SDP continuation. It breaks potentially big lists of services into smaller, manageable chunks that can be requested sequentially.
Another fragmentation layer.
Sort of, yes, but specific to SDP responses. What's unique here, and ultimately problematic, is that the format of the continuation state, the little piece of information the server sends back telling the client here's where we left off, was not standardized by the Bluetooth specification.
Not standardized, so everyone can implement it differently.
Exactly. This crucial lack of standardization created a breeding ground for vulnerabilities, as different implementations in different operating systems interpreted and handled this continuation state differently, leading to logic errors.
Ah, inconsistencies leading to bugs. Makes sense.
Let's look at two critical examples of how this lack of standardization played out, resulting in information leaks. First, a vulnerability in the Linux BlueZ's Bluetooth stack, CVE 2017-1000 or 250s, led to an information leak.
Another bluesy one, okay.
Yes. The flaw was in how BlueZ's structure for managing these SDP continuations, called SUDP state, tracked how much data had already been sent in previous fragments. Specifically, it contained a field called max byte sent. An attacker found they could manipulate this field to crafted requests.
How could they manipulate it?
How it was triggered. By sending repeated, specially crafted continuation requests, an attacker could essentially trick the SDP server into believing it had already sent more data than it actually had. When the attacker then asked for the next fragment of the service list, the system, due to this incorrect max byte sent value, would inadvertently read and send data out of bounds from its response buffer in the heap memory.
Reading past the end of the intended data again.
Precisely. The impact of this was an information leak from the kernel's heap memory. This could potentially disclose highly sensitive data residing nearby in memory, possibly including things like Bluetooth link keys or other cryptographic material. It's reminiscent in concept, though different in mechanism, to the infamous Heartbleed vulnerability in OpenSSL, where a small flaw allowed reading sensitive memory contents. A seemingly minor state management error leading to potentially major data exposure.
Okay, that's Linux. What about Android? Did it have similar issues?
It did, yes. A similar yet distinct Android information leak, CVE 2017-0785, also stemmed from this non-standardized SDP continuation state.
How did it differ?
The flaw in Android's SDP server implementation was a subtle logic error related to the continuation state. While it did perform some checks on a value called CompTIA, part of the continuation state, the crucial mistake was that the system recalculated the total number of service handles, nums handles, each time a continuation request was received, instead of saving the original total from the first request and validating against that.
Ah, so recalculating instead of using the original value created a window for confusion, where the server's understanding of how much is left to send could be manipulated. That sounds like a classic state management or calculation error.
Precisely. A state confusion vulnerability. How it was triggered. An attacker would first send an initial service search request, say asking for service A, and receive a legitimate continuation state back from the server, indicating more data was available. Then the attacker would send a second request, but this time asking for a different service, say service B, specifically, one that would normally return a smaller response size. Crucially, with this second request, the attacker would append the original continuation state from the first larger request for service A.
Okay, mixing and matching requests and continuation.
Exactly. This created a state confusion on the server.
Mm-hmm.
A subsequent mathematical calculation, rem handles, nums handles CompTIA, then caused what's called an integer underflow of the rem handles variable. This variable was a 16-bit unsigned short. Because CompTIA from the first request was now larger than nums handles, recalculated for the smaller second request, the subtraction resulted in rem handles wrapping around from a small negative number to a very, very large positive number like 0x-FT5-65535.
So a tiny count becomes an enormous one due to a math error. Again, that feels like it could cause massive chaos downstream.
It absolutely did.
Right.
The impact was that a subsequent for loop, which was supposed to copy the remaining service handles into the response buffer, now thought it needed to copy 0x over handles. It then proceeded to copy data way out of bounds from the source handles array in memory. This massive information leak could disclose a large portion of the Bluetooth process's stack memory. This leaked memory could contain extremely sensitive information like encryption keys, but also critical memory addresses, pointers. These leak pointers could be used by an attacker to bypass address space layout randomization, ASLR, that security feature we mentioned that randomizes memory locations. Bypassing ASLR makes exploiting other memory corruption vulnerabilities like buffer overflows much easier and more reliable.
So this info leak basically provided a roadmap for other attacks.
Precisely. It was a stepping stone vulnerability. The larger lesson from both of these SDP vulnerabilities is fascinating. The seemingly minor decision by the Bluetooth standards body not to standardize the format of the SDP continuation state, while maybe allowing implementation flexibility, paradoxically created two distinct yet conceptually similar critical information leak vulnerabilities across two major operating systems, Linux and Android. It really underscores how nuanced details in protocol design, seemingly minor implementation choices or omissions in standards, can lead to widespread serious security implications down the line. This is why meticulous attention to specification details, secure implementation practices, and thorough cross-platform security assessments are absolutely paramount.
It's the details that get you. Okay, so SDP leaks paved the way. What about executing code directly through other Bluetooth protocols on Android? These are really serious vulnerabilities we're uncovering, affecting foundational protocols like L2CAP and SDP, potentially exposing sensitive data or enabling other attacks. But our deep dive into Android, based on the research we looked at, reveals even more direct paths to compromise, specifically within the Bluetooth Network Encapsulation Protocol, or BNEP. What exactly is BNEP's role again? And what terrifying flaws were lurking within its Android implementation that allowed attackers to actually run their own code?
Right, BNEP. Its main role, as the name suggests, is network encapsulation. It's typically used for providing IP-based network services over a Bluetooth connection, most commonly for things like internet tethering, sharing your phone's internet connection with a laptop via Bluetooth, for example.
Okay, turning Bluetooth into an Ethernet cable, basically?
That's a good way to think about it. It essentially allows various forms of Ethernet packets, like IP packets, to be wrapped up and transmitted over an underlying L2CAP connection. Now, within Android's specific implementation of the BNEP protocol, researchers discovered two critical remote code execution, RCE, vulnerabilities. These allowed attackers within Bluetooth range to run arbitrary code on the target Android device. No user interaction needed.
Two more RCEs. Okay, let's break them down. What was the first one?
Let's unpack the first one. Android RCE SanFon CDE 2017-0781, a heap overflow due to a MemPy error.
Another MemPy issue.
Seems common.
A very common source of bugs. The flaw was located in a function called bnep-detain, which is part of Android's BNEP message handler. There was a specific, somewhat obscure section of code designed to temporarily save unparsed BNEP control messages if a connection state change, like authentication, was pending. It was meant to process them later. This involved allocating a buffer in the system's heap memory, using OCLOC, to store this pending data, with the size based on the remaining length of the incoming packet, Rumlin. Okay, allocate space, save the data. Seems reasonable. What went wrong?
The problem was, in the subsequent memory copy operation, MECPY, the code copied the incoming data into the allocated buffer, appending data, but it started copying at an offset of 8 bytes into the buffer, appending data +1, where the +1 was effectively skipping an 8-byte header structure. However, it copied the full original remaining length remlin starting from that offset.
Right. So if the system allocated space for exactly X bytes, but then started copying X bytes beginning 8 bytes past the start of that allocated space, it's essentially overflowing the allocated buffer by exactly 8 bytes every single time this code path is hit.
Exactly. That's the aha moment of this vulnerability. A tiny, consistent 8-byte heap overflow. What's particularly telling is that this heap corruption happened every single time this specific code path was triggered. And as a side effect, it also caused a memory leak. This strongly suggests that this particular part of the code likely never actually ran correctly in real-world usage or during rigorous testing. It was probably a latent bug hidden in an edge case, just waiting for a security researcher to find it and figure out how to trigger it deliberately.
A bug hiding in plain sight in untested code. Okay, so how easy was it to exploit?
In terms of exploitability, the attacker had control over Remlin, which determined the size of the initial memory allocation on the heap. This allowed for precise memory manipulation techniques, often called heap shaping, or heap feng shui, where the attacker makes carefully sized allocations to control the memory layout. Combined with the ability to control the exact 8-byte overflow payload, this made reliable exploitation for remote code execution significantly easier than exploiting more complex or less controlled overflows.
Control the size, control the overflow data. Yeah, sounds exploitable. Okay, what was the second Android RCE and BNEP?
Now for the second and arguably even more severe vulnerability. Android RCE #2 CVE 2017-0782, an integer underflow leading to a massive heap overflow.
Integer underflow again. We saw that with SDP.
Yes, another instance of integer arithmetic going wrong with potentially disastrous consequences. The flaw was located in a different function, bnet process control packet, which handles incoming BNEP control messages. An integer underflow occurred in the remlin variable, which tracked the remaining length of the message being processed. Again, remlin was a 16-bit unsigned short. This underflow happened when the code was processing an unrecognized BNEP extension header. In this case, remlin was decremented by xlen1, where xlen was the length of the unrecognized extension, an 8-bit value controlled by the attacker.
Okay, so if the attacker sends an extension header whose length xlen is larger than the current remaining length remlin.
Exactly. If xlen was larger than remlin, the subtraction remlin, xlen1, would result in remlin underflowing. It would wrap around from a small positive value to a very large positive value, like 0 IS65535.
So a small remaining length suddenly becomes an enormous one due to a simple math error triggered by attacker input. That feels like it could cause massive chaos downstream in the processing logic.
It absolutely did. The immediate consequence was that this underflowed, now extremely large value of remlin was then used to set the length field equivalent of the internal packet structure. This made the packet appear exceptionally large to the upper layers of the network stack, effectively bypassing normal maximum transmission unit, MTU size restrictions.
It tricks the system into thinking the packet is huge. Then what?
Then a subsequent memory copy operation, MENCPI, occurred later in the processing pipeline, specifically in the PAN, Personal Area Network Profile Message Handler. This MENCPI attempted to copy the data associated with this now supposedly enormous packet, pufflin being 0 bar, into a relatively small, fixed-size 4096-byte heap buffer, RSB.data. This resulted in a massive heap overflow, potentially corrupting up to 0 by 1,000 bytes, around 60 kilobytes of adjacent heap memory.
A huge overflow this time. How exploitable was that?
For exploitability, while the actual source of the data being copied in this massive overflow wasn't directly controlled byte for byte by the attacker, the data did come from the same general heap memory area where the attacker could make allocations, using techniques possibly involving the first RCE bug. This allowed for sophisticated heap spray techniques, where the attacker fills the heap with copies of their malicious code or data, increasing the chances that the overflow will overwrite something useful with their payload. This, coupled with the ability to control allocation sizes via RCE SHAG1 and potentially bypassing ASLR using the information leaked from the SDP vulnerability we discussed earlier, could be chained together to achieve reliable remote code execution.
Wow, chaining multiple vulnerabilities together. Okay, so what was the overall impact if an attacker successfully exploited either of these BNEP RCEs on an Android phone?
The combined impact of these Android RCEs is frankly staggering. Successful exploitation leads to remote code execution running with the privileges of the core Android Bluetooth service, usually com.android.bluetooth. This service is exceptionally privileged on Android devices.
How privileged? What could they do?
We're talking full access to the device's file system. An attacker could potentially read your contacts, messages, documents, photos, application data, basically anything stored on the phone. It grants full control of the entire network stack, allowing for silent data exfiltration, intercepting communications, man-in-the-middle attacks, or even bridging the phone's network connections, like Wi-Fi or cellular, to the attacker's machine. And perhaps most disturbingly, this level of privilege allows an attacker to simulate an attached keyboard or mouse, effectively granting them full interactive control over the device's user interface, as if they were holding it in their hands.
Complete device takeover silently over Bluetooth.
Complete takeover. And critically, just like the Linux L2C AP RCE, these Android BNEP vulnerabilities were also potentially wormable. A compromised phone could actively scan for and attack other vulnerable Android devices nearby.
The Bluetooth worm scenario again. Terrifying.
It really raises an important question. If we're consistently finding these kinds of fundamental, severe vulnerabilities in core communication protocols that are deeply integrated into modern operating systems, what does it truly say about the overall security posture of these complex devices we rely on daily? These aren't just minor application bugs. They are direct, unauthenticated routes to complete system compromise, lurking in the foundational layers.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what else is hiding in those millions of lines of code.
Exactly. The ability to understand the mechanisms behind such RCEs and more importantly, how to prevent or mitigate them through secure coding, rigorous testing, and continuous assessment is absolutely core to the skills needed for conducting security assessments, managing secure network operations, and developing robust incident response plans in your professional cybersecurity career. It really underscores why cultivating ethical hacking skills, the ability to find these flaws before the bad guys do, is so incredibly crucial in today's threat landscape.
Find them before they're exploited in the wild. Okay, this is heavy stuff. What about attacks that maybe don't require finding these deep code flaws, but exploit the protocols in more subtle ways? We've talked about these critical remote code execution vulnerabilities, giving an attacker complete control over a device by exploiting flaws deep in the code. That's obviously devastating. But what about a different kind of attack? A man-in-the-middle attack, maybe, that's so silent and pervasive it makes even the infamous Wi-Fi pineapple look somewhat limited in comparison. This is apparently where Bluetooth's seemingly innocuous just works pairing mechanism takes a dark, unintended, and frankly, quite worrying turn.
That's right. We're shifting focus now from exploiting implementation bugs to exploiting weaknesses or ambiguities in the design of the Bluetooth protocols themselves, specifically around pairing and authentication. Let's look at the Security Management Protocol, or SMP. This is the part of Bluetooth responsible for handling all aspects of device authentication and pairing, setting up the secure link keys. Its modern iteration includes Secure Simple Pairing, SSP, which offers several pairing methods. While methods like numeric comparison or passkey entry, used when devices have displays and keyboards, are generally robust and provide protection against man-in-the-middle attacks, SSP has a critical weakest link, the Just Works pairing method.
Just works. That's the one where you don't have to enter a PIN, right? Like connecting a simple headset or speaker.
Exactly. It's used primarily for devices that lack an adequate interface for PIN code validation or display, like a basic Bluetooth speaker, a mouse, maybe a car stereo system. Critically, the Bluetooth specification explicitly states that Just Works offers no man-in-the-middle MITM protection. It authenticates the devices to each other based on their capabilities, but doesn't verify that the device you're connecting to is actually the one you think you're connecting to.
No MITM protection.
Okay, that sounds like a problem waiting to happen.
It is, and compounding this, the Bluetooth specification notes that the exact implementation of user acceptance for Just Works pairing is left up to the end product manufacturer.
Up to the end product manufacturer. That phrase again. That sounds like a recipe for inconsistent security across different phones and operating systems, leaving room for assumptions or shortcuts that could be exploited. Exactly. This ambiguity leads directly to the problematic auto-confirm behavior discovered in some major implementations. Critically, researchers found that both Android and Windows implementations of Just Works would often automatically accept temporary pairings initiated by another device without any user interaction or notification, especially if the local device, your phone or laptop, has display yes/no capabilities, meaning it could show a prompt, but the remote device claims to have limited input-output capabilities, like a simple headset.
Wait, it just auto-accepts the connection silently, even if my phone could have asked me?
In many common scenarios, yes, particularly for establishing short-term keys used by certain profiles. This effectively bypasses the authentication process from the user's perspective entirely, allowing an attacker's device to silently establish a basic level of authenticated connection with your device without you ever knowing it happened. Even though the Bluetooth specification allows for and arguably implies a user prompt should occur, these implementations simply didn't provide one for these temporary pairings under certain capability exchanges, making the initial connection invisible.
A silent, invisible pairing. Okay. What can an attacker do with that?
This seemingly minor auto-confirm behavior then exposes higher-level Bluetooth services and profiles to attack. For instance, the researchers focused on the PAN, or Personal Area Network, profile in Android. This profile allows devices to connect to networks via Bluetooth. They found that the PAN profile had a particularly low security level requirement specified in the Android source code. It required basic authentication, BTMSS and Authenticate, which could be satisfied by the temporary key obtained via Just Works. But notably, it did not require authorization, BTMSS and Authorize, or explicit man-in-the-middle protection, BTMSS and MADM.
So a misconfiguration in the profile's security settings.
Essentially, yes. A dangerous misconfiguration, or perhaps an oversight based on older profile specifications that hadn't kept up with the security implications of modern Bluetooth pairing mechanisms like SSP Just Works. This misconfiguration meant an attacker could successfully connect to the victim's PAN profile using only that short-term key obtained silently through Just Works, without any further authorization prompts appearing to the user.
Okay, so the attacker uses JustWorks to get a temporary key silently, and then uses that key to connect to the network profile also silently. What happens next? What does this Bluetooth pineapple attack look like from the inside once they're connected to that PAM profile?
Right, so once the attacker has silently authenticated using JustWorks and successfully connected to the victim's PAN profile, they can then proceed to establish a PAN network connection. And here's the truly insidious part. The Bluetooth specification allows the initiator of the PAN connection, in this case the attacker, to choose both their own role and the remote device's role in the network.
The attacker dictates the route.
Yes. So the attacker sets themselves up as the NAP, the network access point, like a router, and they designate the victim's device as the PAN-NU, the client device connecting to the network. The victim's phone or laptop is then forced by the protocol to treat the attacker's device as if it were a brand new, hot-plugged network interface, like plugging in a USB Ethernet adapter. This happens completely silently in the background, without any prompts or visible changes appearing on the user's screen or interface.
Yeah.
Imagine a new network connection suddenly appearing in your system settings, but you never approved it and never saw it happen.
A new network interface just materializing on my phone or laptop without me knowing it. That's really alarming. And then I'm assuming my network traffic could potentially be rerouted through the attacker.
Precisely. That's the goal. Once that new illegitimate Bluetooth network interface is created and activated on the victim's device, the operating system typically automatically sends out a DHCP request on that new interface, seeking network configuration details like an IP address, DNS servers, and routing information.
Standard network behavior.
Standard behavior, but now exploited. The attacker, acting as the NAP network access point and running a malicious DHCP server on their own device, can intercept this request and push malicious network settings back to the victim. This can include assigning an IP address, but more critically, setting malicious DNS servers to redirect web traffic, pushing static routes to force traffic through the attacker, and even pushing WPA, Web Proxy Auto Discovery Protocol, configurations on Windows systems. WPAD can force the victim's web browser to automatically use an attacker-controlled proxy server for all web traffic or redirect them to a malicious configuration page.
So they can control my DNS, my routing, my web proxy, basically intercept everything.
That's exactly what it achieves. This is essentially a Bluetooth pineapple attack. The attacker becomes a complete man-in-the-middle for all network traffic that the victim's operating system routes through this new, illegitimate Bluetooth network interface. They can intercept, read, modify, or inject data into the victim's network, communications, emails, browsing sessions, banking logins, file transfers, anything, all without the user's knowledge or consent. It's a completely silent, invisible hijack of their network connectivity.
Wow. Okay, you compared it to the Wi-Fi pineapple. Why is this potentially more dangerous?
It's arguably more dangerous for a key reason. Its initiation method. A traditional Wi-Fi pineapple typically works by listening for Wi-Fi probe requests, usually from devices looking for open networks or networks they've connected to before, and then impersonating those networks to trick the device into connecting. It often relies on the user trying to connect to what they think is a legitimate, albeit maybe open network. It requires some user action or intent, or at least the device actively probing.
Right, it needs that probe request.
The Bluetooth pineapple, exploiting the JustWorks auto-confirm and PAN profile issues, is not subject to those limitations at all. An attacker can potentially force a connection attempt to any targeted device within range, as long as its Bluetooth radio is simply turned on and vulnerable. It doesn't matter what network the victim is currently connected to, Wi-Fi or cellular, and crucially, it requires no user interaction or prior pairing history between the attacker and the victim. It's a direct, unprompted, invisible hijack initiated entirely by the attacker. That makes it exceptionally stealthy and potentially much more effective for targeted attacks.
That is significantly scarier. No user action needed at all.
It really raises an important question for all of us, especially as we use Bluetooth more and more. How much do we blindly trust these seamless Bluetooth connections? How often do you personally actually check or verify the authenticity of every single network interface listed in your device's settings? Probably never, right?
Yeah, never. You just assume they're legitimate.
Exactly. This vulnerability starkly highlights the desperate need for continuous monitoring, for maybe better OS-level controls and notifications around new network interfaces, and certainly for critical thinking when evaluating our perceived network security posture. It directly relates back to your learning outcomes and understanding complex risks, implementing strong access control, which clearly failed here, developing effective network defense strategies, and managing network operations securely against these kinds of sophisticated, silent man-in-the-middle attacks. It shows that convenience sometimes comes at a hidden security cost.
A very hidden cost. Okay, that's a major vulnerability in standard Bluetooth protocols due to design and implementation choices. What about proprietary stuff? We've seen how flaws in standard protocols like L2CIP, SDP, BNEP, and even the pairing mechanisms like SMP just works, especially in their specific implementations on Linux and Android, can be exploited, leading to everything from RCEs to these silent man-in-the-middle attacks. But what about proprietary protocols? Custom-built communication layers developed by vendors like Apple for their own specific purposes. Do they fare any better because they're closed off, or do they perhaps introduce their own unique set of problems, maybe lurking in uncharted territory for security researchers?
That's a crucial question, because proprietary protocols are widespread, especially in tightly integrated ecosystems like Apple's. Do they offer better security through obscurity or custom design, or do they create new, less scrutinized attack surfaces? Generally speaking, Apple often takes a more stringent approach to Bluetooth security in its standard implementations compared to, say, default Android or Windows configurations at the time these vulnerabilities were discovered. For instance, as we noted, iOS does typically inform the user and requires explicit authorization for just works pairings, preventing that silent auto-accept behavior that enabled the Bluetooth Pineapple attack.
Okay, so they closed that specific door.
Right. And in Security Management Protocol, SMP implementation also appears stricter in general, usually preventing L2CAP connections before successful authentication is complete, with the notable exception, perhaps, of the SDP protocol itself, which needs to be accessed pre-authentication. This significantly limits the attack surface available to an unauthenticated attacker trying to probe for vulnerabilities in higher-level standard protocols, which is a commendable security design choice.
So it sounds like Apple, at least in its implementation of the standard Bluetooth layers, builds a stronger initial fortress with more explicit checks and user prompts. But there's always a but in these deep dives, isn't there? A hidden path, maybe.
There is indeed a significant caveat, and you've hit on it, the hidden path. While their handling of standard security mechanisms might be stronger, Apple, like many vendors, has also implemented proprietary protocols that run in parallel to or on top of the standard L2CAP layer. These custom protocols often use specific fixed L2CAP channel IDs, CIDs, that are technically reserved for future use, according to the official Bluetooth specification. Examples given were 0x2A, 0x2B, 0x3A.
Using reserved channels for their own stuff.
Okay. The critical point here is that these proprietary layers, developed in-house by Apple for specific features, are not necessarily subject to the same strict security mechanisms and checks that Apple applies to the standardized Bluetooth layers like SMP or standard L2CAP connections. They might bypass some of the normal authentication or authorization steps.
So it's like adding your own side door to the fortress.
That's a perfect analogy. Imagine the fortress has an incredibly secure main gate, guarded diligently, with multiple checks for anyone trying to enter via the standard path. But then the castle designers added a secret tunnel, known only to them, for their own use. And maybe that secret tunnel isn't guarded as carefully, or perhaps its entrance bypasses the main gate's security checks altogether. These proprietary protocols can essentially function like those secret tunnels, potentially creating undocumented, unexamined, and less secured attack surfaces that even a security-conscious vendor might overlook, simply because they fall outside the standard security models and testing procedures. One such proprietary protocol highlighted in the research was EA, Apple's low-energy audio protocol.
LAP, what's that used for?
LEP was apparently designed by Apple primarily to stream audio efficiently to Bluetooth low-energy BLE peripherals. Think maybe low-energy headsets, or perhaps devices like the Siri remote for Apple TV, which uses Bluetooth. The research indicated that two specific fixed L2CAP IDs were reserved for the LEAPS operation, 0x2A for signaling messages, and 0x2B for the actual audio data stream.
Okay, custom channels for low-energy audio. Where was the flaw?
Now here's the flaw. While most of the code implementing the LEBP protocol apparently included validations to ensure that incoming messages originated from legitimate Bluetooth low-energy BLE connections, as intended, this crucial validation was found to be insufficient or missing in the specific handler function responsible for processing incoming audio data packets arriving on the fixed CID 0x2B.
The audio data channel handler lacked the check.
Exactly. This specific handler was therefore exposed to receiving and processing packets not just from BLE connections, but also from legacy Bluetooth Classic connections. And crucially, connections to this specific proprietary CID, 0x2B, appeared to be completely unauthenticated. There was no check to ensure the device sending the audio data was legitimate or paired.
Wait, so it's a channel only meant for trusted BLE devices, but it accidentally accepts unauthenticated connections from any nearby Bluetooth Classic device. That sounds like a major oversight, like leaving a specific backdoor completely unlocked and unguarded.
That's precisely what it seems like. A secret backdoor that was only supposed to be opened by a specific type of key, BLA, but it turns out almost any key, Bluetooth Classic, could open it, and no one was checking IDs at the door.
So what exactly was the vulnerability that allowed an attacker to run malicious code through this open door?
The vulnerability arose in how this specific audio data handler, LEAP audio handler, processed the incoming packets it received on CID 0x2B. It involves a memory copy operation, MEMPI, that copied the incoming packet's audio data into an internal buffer called audio chunk. This audio chunk buffer was allocated with a maximum size, reportedly 0x68 bytes, 104 bytes. However, when the vulnerable handler was triggered via a Bluetooth Classic connection, which can typically send larger packets in BLE, the size of the incoming packet data was not properly checked or limited against the 0x68 byte size of the audio chunk buffer before the MEMPI occurred.
Another unchecked MEMPI leading to a buffer overflow.
Exactly. A classic heap-based buffer overflow. The attacker can simply send a Bluetooth Classic packet to the LEP audio CID 0x2B, containing more than 0x68 bytes of data. The handler would then attempt to copy this oversized data into the smaller audio chunk buffer, overflowing it and corrupting adjacent memory on the heap with attacker-controlled data.
Okay, heap overflow with attacker data. How bad was the impact?
The impact was significant. Since this overflow could potentially be triggered multiple times by sending multiple crafted packets, it could be leveraged by a skilled attacker to achieve remote code execution. And because this code runs within the highly privileged iOS Bluetooth stack process, Bluetooth, successful exploitation would grant the attacker substantial control over the device. This specific vulnerability, designated CVE 2017-143-515, affected devices running iOS versions prior to 10. And the most chilling part, just like the Android RCEs, no user interaction or special configuration was required on the targeted iPhone or iPad. An attacker within Bluetooth range could simply send a malformed Bluetooth Classic packet to that specific proprietary LEAP channel CID and potentially gain remote code execution silently.
Silent RCE on iOS via proprietary protocol. That's quite something.
It really is. The larger lesson here is quite profound. Proprietary protocols, while often intended for innovation, unique device capabilities, or performance optimization, can inadvertently create these undocumented and potentially unexamined attack surfaces. Even a security-conscious vendor like Apple might overlook vulnerabilities in these custom layers that fall outside their standard security testing or threat models. This case serves as a stark reminder that comprehensive security auditing and vulnerability assessment must extend to all layers of a system, including proprietary ones, not just the standardized protocols, to ensure truly robust defense in depth.
You can't just secure the main gate, you have to check all the secret tunnels too.
Precisely. This understanding is absolutely key for accurately evaluating the security posture across diverse systems and proprietary implementations. It helps us recognize how seemingly subtle flaws, especially in custom, less scrutinized code, can have potentially profound consequences for overall system security. It reinforces that continuous process of evaluation and maintenance across the entire stack.
It really drives home that security is a holistic process.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, from basic Wi-Fi flaws to deep Bluetooth stack vulnerabilities and proprietary protocol issues. Let's try to bring this all together.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for us? Especially for those listening who are students, maybe in BCIS 43, 45, or early in their careers in IT, MIS, CIS. We're heading into a world that's increasingly reliant on all this wireless connectivity. We've seen how pervasive and deeply embedded these vulnerabilities can be, from Wi-Fi weaknesses we thought were long gone, to sophisticated Bluetooth stack exploits, and even silent attacks using NFC or proprietary protocols. It's honestly a lot to take in.
It is a lot, and it can feel overwhelming. But understanding these threats is the first crucial step towards building effective defenses. As the course description for BCIS 4345 rightly emphasizes, network and system security is fundamentally a continuous process. This is perhaps the single most crucial takeaway from our entire deep dive today.
Continuous, not static. Exactly. There will never be a fully addressed or permanently solved solution to wireless security concerns or indeed any area of cybersecurity. Attackers, by their very nature, will always search for novel approaches, new exploits, ingenious ways to bypass our defenses. Our goal, therefore, isn't to somehow eliminate all threats. That's an impossible task. Instead, our mission is to enhance the wireless connection experience, to enable all that convenience and connectivity, but by making our systems resilient. And resilience comes through that ongoing cycle. Constant analysis of threats and vulnerabilities, diligent implementation of best practices and controls, rigorous evaluation of their effectiveness, and proactive maintenance and patching.
Analysis, implementation, evaluation, maintenance, the cycle.
It's a cycle that never ends. And your role as current or future cybersecurity professionals will be right at the forefront of managing that cycle, constantly learning, constantly adapting to the evolving threat landscape. Given this continuous threat landscape, we can distill some critical recommendations for enhancing wireless security, both at an organizational or system level, and also thinking about your own professional growth.
Okay, let's hear them. What should organizations be doing?
For organizational and system-level best practices, first, isolation is paramount. Whenever feasible, always try to separate wireless networks from critical wired networks using dedicated firewalling systems and network segmentation. Create trust zones. This provides a crucial layer of containment if the wireless network is compromised. This is especially critical if you still have any legacy hardware that only supports WEP. Ideally, avoid using WEP security whenever possible. Phase it out entirely. If you absolutely can't, isolate it aggressively.
Get rid of WEP, isolate wireless. Got it.
Second, configuration and compliance. Network administrators must ensure that all WLAN client devices and access points adhere to standardized, hardened security configurations and comply strictly with organizational security policies and rules. This isn't just a one-time setup. It requires consistent enforcement, auditing, and configuration management for good governance. Use the strongest protocols available, like WPA3, disable unused services, change default passwords, etc.
Standardize and enforce configurations. Makes sense.
Third, continuous assessment. Organizations absolutely should adopt continuous attack surface monitoring and vulnerability scanning, coupled with periodic, in-depth technical security assessments, including penetration testing. This is precisely where ethical hacking experimentation becomes not just a specialized skill for consultants, but a vital proactive defense mechanism for internal teams, too. You need to think like an attacker, constantly testing your own systems to find weaknesses before they do.
Test yourself before others test you.
Exactly. Fourth, risk prioritization. Security resources are always finite. So give top priority to comprehensive risk assessment. Understand what your most critical assets and data are, identify the most likely threats, and analyze your vulnerabilities. Use this risk assessment to develop strong, effective security policies and prioritize preventative techniques that offer quantifiable protection where it matters most. This directly informs your implementation efforts and ensures you're focusing resources effectively.
Focus on the biggest risks. Okay, those are solid, actionable steps for organizations. But what about leveraging new technologies? We've seen how rapidly tech evolves, both for attack and for defense. Are there tools that can help us in this ongoing fight?
Absolutely. We need to be constantly looking at and leveraging emerging technologies to stay ahead, or at least keep pace. Firstly, advanced AML. There's a critical need for and ongoing development in multidimensional artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning ML algorithms specifically designed for real-time threat detection within complex WLAN environments.
AI for wireless security, how would that work?
These systems can learn baseline network behavior and then identify anomalies that might indicate an attack in progress. Things like unusual traffic patterns, spoofed management frames, weird authentication failures, signals suggesting a jamming attack, or the sudden appearance of a rogue access point. These powerful tools should ideally be integrated at all protocol layers, from the lowest Bluetooth stack signals to the highest Wi-Fi application traffic, and, importantly, they need to be rigorously tested themselves, perhaps through certified ethical hacking, to ensure their effectiveness, minimize false positives, and understand their limitations. They can potentially spot subtle attacks that signature-based systems might miss.
Learning normal behavior to spot the abnormal. Cool. What else?
Secondly, don't forget the fundamentals enhanced by modern tech. Intrusion detection systems, IDS, and virtual private networks, VPNs. Always explore and implement robust, real-time IDS specifically tuned for wireless environments. These act as watchdogs, alerting administrators to suspicious activity based on known attack signatures or behavioral anomalies, and encourage or enforce the use of VPNs, especially for remote access or connections over untrusted networks like public Wi-Fi. VPNs provide an encrypted tunnel for data, protecting data integrity and confidentiality, even if the underlying wireless link itself is compromised.
Layering defenses with IDS and VPNs. Good reminder.
And this brings us back full circle to your role in professional growth. This is where you, the listeners, the students, the aspiring professionals come in. The growing sophistication and relentless evolution of cybercriminals necessitates a parallel, continuous development of cybersecurity expertise in defenders. Ethical hacking isn't just about finding cool flaws or breaking things. It's about understanding attack vectors deeply so you can build better defenses, develop new security standards, improve our detection capabilities, and educate others. It's about being proactive, not just reactive, and taking ownership of developing your skills to meet these challenges.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
Well, the landscape is definitely complex. It's constantly changing, that's for sure. But the knowledge and the practical skills you're gaining right now, through courses like BCIS 4345, through deep dives like this, they are absolutely paramount. The joy of discovery in this field isn't just about finding the cool new tech, the next gadget. It's about finding new ways to secure our digital lives, our careers, our organizations, our society. This entire discussion, hopefully, has integrated many of your key learning outcomes. Really understanding the diverse computer-related risks in wireless, knowing how to secure systems and ensure data integrity, considering physical security, applying governance principles, conducting risk analysis, implementing robust encryption, and ultimately developing those practical skills needed to implement, configure, assess, manage, monitor, and respond to incidents in this incredibly dynamic environment. We really want to inspire you to own your career growth, embrace that mindset of lifelong learning, and become proactive, skilled defenders in this dynamic digital era. #tagged outro.
Wow.
What a journey through the hidden dangers lurking in our wireless connectivity. From the surprisingly persistent foundational flaws in WEP to the sophisticated silent remote code executions hiding deep in Bluetooth stacks, and even those insidious man-in-the-middle capabilities of the Bluetooth pineapple, we've seen just how pervasive and impactful these invisible threats can truly be.
Yeah, and let's not forget the evolving risks we touched on with NFC contactless payments and even the unexpected vulnerabilities found in proprietary protocols, reminding us that no corner of the wireless world is inherently safe without scrutiny.
It really paints a picture. That air around us, it is indeed a highway for data. But hopefully after this deep dive, you have a much deeper understanding of the traffic on that highway, the inherent risks involved, and critically, some concrete ideas on how to build your own robust defenses, both personally and professionally.
Absolutely. The threats are very real, and they're constantly evolving. That's undeniable. But the good news is, so are the tools, the techniques, and the knowledge available to combat them effectively. We can make our digital world safer, but it requires diligence and continuous effort.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into wireless network security. We genuinely hope this exploration has given you some significant aha moments, maybe cleared up some misconceptions, and provided practical takeaways for your studies in BCIS 4345 and for your careers beyond.
Yeah, hope it was valuable.
If you found this valuable, please do us that favor. Like this, subscribe to the deep dive and share it with your friends, colleagues, classmates, anyone in your networks who could benefit. And remember, all those extra resources we mentioned, links to the research, guides, they're all waiting for you down in the description.
Definitely check those out. And here's a final thought to leave you with. Consider this. As more and more of our world becomes wirelessly connected, not just phones and laptops, but cars, homes, medical devices, industrial controls, extending into new realms like augmented reality or ubiquitous IoT, what new, currently unimagined attack surfaces might be emerging right now, silently, invisibly, and how will you prepare to defend them?
Something to think about. Both hosts in unison. Stay connected, stay secure. Until next time, keep your network strong, your data protected, and your curiosity alive.